Hello everyone, it's Sean with Internet Work Consulting. I'm doing a series of videos relating to Ubuntu and Linux. In this episode, I'll be walking you through an Ubuntu installation. For some background, Ubuntu is a Linux distribution of the Debian flavor. It's maintained by Conical, a Mark Shuttleworth company from South Africa. Ubuntu is a South African word meaning humanness. We chose Ubuntu because it's a major player in the Linux community and it's free. It's not just commercial masquerading as open source. Our environment is a virtual computer using Oracle's VirtualBox. It's free and open source virtualization that is released under the GNU license. Our virtual machine is configured with 2 GB of RAM. We have allocated 2 virtual CPUs. Our CD-ROM drive is pointed to an ISO of the Ubuntu installation. We also configured our hard drive as a VHD file for compatibility with Microsoft's Hyper-V. Our network is configured as a bridge. This will operate intuitively just like your computer plugged into the network. More or less, 2 computers will now share one adapter. The first screen for interaction is selecting a language. Use the arrows up and down to select your language and then press enter. Now you should be at the Ubuntu menu. This installation media can be used to install, test, repair, or maintain Ubuntu servers. We'll choose to install Ubuntu Server, the first option. Again, use the up and down arrow keys to change the selection and then press enter to select. The Ubuntu Server installation is a text-based install. Again, select the language for the installation by using the up and down arrow keys and pressing the enter key to make your selection. For this text-based install, we'll use the arrow keys for list and menus. To move from a list to a button, use the tab key. To change the input controls from text to buttons, use the tab key. When you have made your selection, press the enter key. Use the up and down arrow keys and select the country where the server will reside, then press enter. For international setups or setups using non-standard keyboards, you can do keyboard detection. This will prompt you to type selected keys to determine the type of keyboard you are using. We will tab to no and then press enter. Now that we skipped keyboard detection, we could select our layout by name. For standard desktops and laptops sold in the United States, select English US. Finally, you'll be prompted to choose a specific English US keyboard. Most users will just select English US again. The installation will detect hardware, followed by loading the software for the found hardware. After hardware detection, you'll be prompted for a host name. This is the network name used to identify the computer on the network. This name should be unique and conform to the corporate standard for your server names. If this is a web server for a public website, we might make the host name www, as in www.internetworkconsulting.net. Contact your CNWRD network administrator for guidance on choosing a host name for your production server. Now, let me climb on my soapbox, and I love my soapbox. When setting up a server, make sure to document all identifiers, authentication tokens, security questions, usernames, passwords, IP addresses, especially if they're static IP addresses. As a network administrator, it is your responsibility to document and administer the network. Now, make sure to document the host name. Next, we need to choose a username. The root account exists but has been disabled from remote login. The root user is only available at the console. You physically have to sit in front of the keyboard to log in as root. The user we're about to create is in addition to the root user. The user we're creating will be used by system administrators. This account is not for you. It's not your personal account. It's for administration. If this is used in a business or organization, I strongly recommend not naming this user after a person, but more so after a job title. We'll be using system administrators. Please note that this is not the username used for authentication. It is a display name used in a list of users. Press the tab key until continue is highlighted and then press enter. Now enter the username used for authentication. Tab to continue and then press enter. Make sure to document the username at this point. Next, enter the password. Make sure to document this password. Now, you will enter the same password a second time to ensure it was typed correctly the first time. Do you want to encrypt your home directory? In a high security environment, you might choose yes. For all other environments, we recommend no. Have you ever tried to recover an encrypted environment? It's usually not an option. The system is trying to reach a time server over the internet. This allows the installation to guess your time zone. Next, if it could reach a time server, the system will guess the time zone. In this instance, America Chicago is the correct selection for Central Standard Time. Choose yes if it guessed your time zone correctly. Otherwise, you'll need to select no and then choose the correct time zone. Unix partitions the disks by creating many partitions, isolating critical system components from the users and often conflicting demands. We will set up the system with two partitions, one for the swap file and the other for the file system. The first partition will be a 2 GB swap partition. A swap partition is used as memory by the system, so when RAM is exhausted, some memory can be swapped to the disk and then more items can be loaded into memory. Swapping is very expensive performance-wise, as the disk is traditionally the slowest form of memory. In virtual environments, and with the low cost of memory, swapping should be something we think twice about. We can, and for relatively cheap, purchase a lot of memory, so swapping is completely unnecessary. Choose Manual and press Enter. This is the partitioning menu that lists the devices and the partitions on those devices, along with some other options. Arrow key to SCSI 1, that's also labeled SDA, and press Enter. What you are selecting is the device. The device in Linux is identified as SDA. SD is the 2-digit identifier for a SCSI disk. A is the first disk. You will be prompted to create a partition table if a compatible partition table was not found. Select Yes. If this disk has critical data on it or has previously been used, by selecting Yes, all data will be lost. Now we are back to our partitioning menu. This time, you will see free space listed under our device. Arrow key to the free space, and then press Enter. Now you have to tell it what to do with the free space. Select Create New Partition, and then press Enter. Enter the size of the new partition and the unit measures. Please note that you must provide a space before the unit measures. Unit measures can be GB for gigabytes, MB for megabytes. Next is the partition type. A master boot record can have at most 4 partitions. If we need more than 4 partitions, we can split a partition into 4 more logical partitions. It is best to keep your boot partition as a primary. Same goes for the swap partition. So with that in mind, we have at most 10 possible partitions. For our swap partition, we will make it a primary partition. Where would we like our swap? At the front of the disk or the end of the disk? On older spindle drives, this selection is provided for performance reasons. On newer solid-state disks and virtualized machines, this has less relevance. If performances are concerned, make sure to buy enough RAM. It's cheaper than paying a computer engineer to calculate the advantages of swap file location for a given storage technologies. I'm choosing the beginning. I'm in a virtualized environment with an SSD, so it really doesn't matter. This next screen is where we configure a file system. It's defaulting to a regular file system, so arrow to Use As and press Enter so we can configure this to a swap partition. Arrow down to Swap Area and press Enter. We are back to the partition settings. Arrow to and press Enter to choose Done Setting Up the Partition. Now that we have a swap partition, you'll see it listed under the device before the free space. Next, we'll add our file system. Select free space again and then press Enter. Again, select Create New Partition and then press Enter. This should have defaulted to the total amount of free space left on the drive. Since we are going to do one partition for everything, tab to continue and then press Enter. This will be another primary partition. Arrow key to the bootable flag and press Enter. This should toggle from off to on. Arrow to Done Setting Up the Partition and then press Enter. Finally, we are at the partition menu with our two partitions, the swap and the file system. Select Finish Partitions and write changes to disk. Next, you'll get a confirmation of the partition table. Double check these changes. If you proceed and there is a major problem, it's a format and reload to fix. Once you've determined the changes are what you want, select Yes. As shown here, we have two partitions, a swap and an ext4 file system. Tab to Yes and then press Enter. Now the core installation will be completed. This will require internet access as the system fetches and installs Ubuntu. The system will ask you about an HTTP proxy before downloading packages. You should know if an HTTP proxy is needed. If not, ask your network administrator. Retrieving. Depending on your internet speed, this might take a few minutes. The installer is downloading software from the internet. If it appears to be stuck on a file or percentage, give it 30 minutes to ensure that it's simply not a slow download. Update options are next. The time-old classic administration task that gets neglected most when the operating system is unfamiliar. It's highly recommended that you install updates, but how is another video in itself. We are selecting no automatic updates. If you select no automatic updates, ensure that you have a process or schedule for manually installing these updates on production machines. Now that Ubuntu Linux is installed, you will be prompted for additional software selections. When administering a Linux server, it's much more convenient to use a terminal like PuTTY. Make sure to select OpenSSH by arrowing down to it, and then press the spacebar to flag it for installation. Now tab to continue and then press Enter. The system is retrieving the last bit of software and installing it. Again, depending on your internet speed, this could take a while. On my machine, it took about 6 minutes. When the installation of additional software is completed, you will be prompted to install Bootloader. When the computer is powered on, it runs software embedded in the computer's hardware. This is called BIOS. Once the computer has loaded and tested itself, it reads from the disk and starts loading the operating system. These programs that start loading the operating system are called a bootloader. The bootloader loads the Linux kernel and passes control to it. Once the bootloader is completed, you are officially running Linux. So, install the Grub bootloader? Select Yes and press Enter. The system is writing the bootloader to the drive and making some final changes. Now the installation is officially completed. Tab to continue and press Enter and the system will reboot. The system is removing the live packages, the installer, so that it can boot up normally. This is the standard shutdown screen you'll see in Linux. Now that the machine has rebooted, you'll see the following menu of boot options. This is the bootloader we installed. You can either select Ubuntu from the menu or wait for the timeout and it will load the selection with the asterisk next to it. Once the bootloader loads Linux, you'll get a black and white screen. This is the kernel loading drivers and probing hardware. Isn't Linux sexy? Next, the kernel, or process number 0, loads a program called init. Init is a program that loads all the software of the Ubuntu system. Notice that the Linux portion is small and quick. The Linux kernel is not the operating system, but only a critical component of the operating system. And like any system, Ubuntu has many parts, with Linux only being one of them. Once the system has gone multi-user, you will have a login prompt. Enter your username and password. As you type your password, you will not receive any indication that you have typed anything. Do not assume that because you do not see stars for each character of the password, that the system did not receive any inputs. It did. Press Enter once your password is completed. Now you'll be at a command prompt that lists the username, @host, followed by a $. Type the command ifconfig to figure out the server's IP address. To the right of inet ADDR is our IP address. This will be used next to connect to the server with PuTTY. On this computer, it's 10.0.0.50. When you open PuTTY, enter the IP address in the hostname or IP address field. This is the 10.0.0.50 address we learned from ifconfig from the console. When connecting to a new server, PuTTY will prompt you to accept the server's encryption key. The key used on my server has been blacked out. Click Yes to continue. Now you'll be at the login prompt. Again, type the username and password followed by the enter key. Like at the console, you will not get feedback that you have typed anything in the password field. Now you should be at the command prompt again. This concludes testing of the Ubuntu Server installation. The system boots, we can log in at the console, the system is on the network, and we can log in over the network. This concludes our video on Ubuntu Server installation. Please take time to subscribe to our channel. If you need support, don't hesitate to call us.